Welcome to the PERC Education Virtual Job Fair webinar. Representatives from the PERC Executive Board are hosting today's webinar. I'm Andrea Zito, and joining me are my colleagues Dorothy Zillick and Lauren Tudor, who will introduce themselves.
Hello, Dorothy Zillick.
Hello, I'm Lauren Tudor. Nice to meet you all.
This webinar is being recorded. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom during the presentation, and we will answer questions at the end. In today's webinar, we will cover tips to help you register for the fair, schedule interviews using the Career Fair Plus app, and having successful virtual interviews. To get started, Dorothy, can you share some tips for the registration process with us?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Andrea. Registration is your first important step to complete for the virtual fair. Please visit the PERC website to locate candidate registration if you have not already done so. There are buttons to easily guide you to online registration. There is also a lot of detailed information for you to look through, such as tips for success and videos to help you prepare for the virtual fair. We will take you through some of those resources later today. Once you've registered, it is important to start doing your research on the employers attending and what openings they are recruiting for that day. Open the app or go to app.careerfairplus.com to navigate to the PERC Education Virtual Job Fair. You can start looking through employers that will be attending without creating an account. It may be helpful to create both a top tier list of employers you want to speak to, as well as a secondary list. Look for characteristics that are important to you and are noteworthy about the district. These can be discussed during your session with the employer to show you have done your homework and are truly interested in the district or school. To make sure you're ready for your next step, check Career Fair Plus often for updates of newly registered employers. The next important step is to book meetings with employers. After you have registered, take some time to create an account on Career Fair Plus to start building your profile. Some important dates to remember are March 13th and March 9th. The scheduling window will open at 10 a.m. on March 13th. We recommend that you register and create your account in Career Fair Plus by March 9th. Meetings may fill up quickly and are scheduled on a first come, first served basis, so having your account ready will be a bonus. Now, I'd like to tell you more about what to include in your account. So building your profile is very important. Your profile should include your resume as well as other relevant information. Make sure your resume is up to date, especially with your teaching experience. You may also want to include additional related experience and professional development you've done, such as trainings, workshops, and seminars that are related to education. Make a good impression with your profile. This is the information employers will see when you book meetings with them, so spend some time to prepare. If you have questions, this is a great time to visit your college or university career center. Next, we want to also share some information on how to find employers after candidates create their account. So when looking for employers, it is important to remember this is an opportunity to meet a wide variety of employers. Try not to just focus on the few popular districts. Keep an open mind. This is a great opportunity for you to do a little bit of exploring and a little bit of research and making connections. Employers may not list every certification area when they register, so you'll also want to discuss anticipated types of opportunities. This kind of networking can lead to a position later. So if an employer is unsure about future vacancies in your certification area, ask for contact information. Take this as a professional opportunity to make a connection and to follow up with them. Andrea, can you tell us a little more about navigating the app to research employers?
Yes, thank you, Dorothy. When researching employers, you can filter by such criteria as location and certification area. This can be helpful when trying to narrow your list of employers to talk to and to schedule appointments with on the day of the fair. On the day of the fair, you will need to plan to arrive a few minutes early as you would for any appointment or interview. You cannot schedule back-to-back meetings. While waiting, you may have time to review your notes and the research that you did on the school district. For video appointments, once you click Join Meeting Room, you will be placed in a virtual waiting room. Recruiters will be able to see that you have arrived and will let you into the meeting room when they are ready to connect with you. We will show a brief video to demonstrate this.
Students can now view their meetings and join their video meeting rooms directly from the web portal. From app.careerfairplus.com, they can select Login, enter their details to log into the platform, and they will be brought to a list of fairs that they're attending. From here, they can scroll down to the fair that they're interested in viewing in more detail, and they will be brought to the list of meetings that they've booked. While they still have to go to the app to create their account and to book the meetings, they will show up for them in the web portal here, and they can click onto the meeting for more details, fuller instructions and description, and they can select Join Meeting to test the video meeting room works and to join their meeting directly on the day of the fair.
Now that we've covered tips on how to navigate the app before and during the fair, we'll share some advice on how to have a successful virtual interview. Your first impression matters whether it occurs virtually or in person. Introduce yourself with a prepared personal commercial, also referred to as an elevator speech. Think of it as an introduction that would take as long as it takes to go from one floor to another on an elevator, usually 30 to 60 seconds. Here's an example. It's important to include who you are, your concentration area, your skills and experience, and how they will benefit that employer. Lauren, could you share some additional tips for preparing for the interview?
Yes, Andrea, happy to do that. So during the interview, you'll want to keep the following tips in mind. First, you'll want to dress professionally. Even though this is a virtual event, professional dress is still recommended. If you're not sure about the appropriateness of a certain outfit, contact your Office of Career Services for more information. During the interview, it's important to remember to be positive and to emphasize your strengths. You want to be prepared to talk about experiences on your resume, highlight the skills that administrators are seeking. Some points to include around this area would be student-centered learning, teaching strategies, collaborative teaching, or integration of technology. You want to make sure that you stay organized during the interview. So after your interactions with employers, make sure you take notes. Note the recruiter's names, contact information, or any special points that you discuss during the interview. This could be related to what the application process is, special characteristics of that district, or any follow-up that you might have offered to do. It's very important to keep track of this information after each individual conversation, because after a day filled with multiple interviews, that information can blur together if you don't capture it right away. And it'll be important to have this information whenever you do your follow-up. During the interview, you also want to show your enthusiasm and that you've done your research. So use information from the research on that district to personalize your responses to their interview questions. Make sure that you show them that you are interested in them and this specific position. Share your enthusiasm for that school, that district, and the position itself. And make sure you explain to them why you're interested in them in that role. If you're looking for additional interview support, contact your school's Office of Career Services. They can provide additional guidance and even schedule a mock interview for you to practice your responses. Another resource would be the AAEE Job Search Handbook for Educators. This is available from most offices of career services. It's also important to know that depending on the district that you're meeting with during the virtual fair, you might encounter a more formal virtual interview or a more informal networking conversation. It's important to be prepared for either option, though, by following the steps that we outlined here today. After the interview, it's important to have follow-up. The follow-up that takes place is just as important as the interview itself. You'll want to send follow-up emails to the employers that you met with and that you want to pursue further. This is why staying organized and writing down that information during your interview is so important. When you reach out by email, attach another copy of your resume. Make sure that you thank them for taking the time to introduce you to their organization and reconfirm your interest in that position. Remember to note any specific details that stood out to you during that conversation. This concludes the presentation that we have today. However, we welcome you to ask any questions of myself and the other panelists by leaving them in the chat feature or by using the Q&A. In fact, I see that we had one come through now. If a recruiter doesn't currently have how many slots they have open listed, does this mean that they are not hosting interviews? That is a great question. Andrea and Dorothy, I'm not sure if either of you might have the answer to that. If an employer doesn't currently right now have listed how many slots they have open, does that mean that they're not hosting interviews, or have they just not updated that yet?
It doesn't mean that they're not hosting interviews. It's possible that they haven't updated it. There may be some employers who don't host interviews, but we won't know until they are finished setting up their sort of virtual booths. And they're definitely not all done with that yet. Employer registration is still open. We have another colleague, Renee Coyne, on the phone or on the call too. Renee, did you want to add to that?
Thanks, Andrea. Yes, I'm Renee Coyne and work with PERC. I'm actually the treasurer as well, and Andrea covered it perfectly. There are some employers who we're still waiting on payment for, and then once we get payment, we will get them into the system to set their slots. So it's new for some employers as well. This in virtual environment doesn't mean that they know everything that's happening. So it does take a little bit of extra time to get them ready. That's why we are definitely encouraging students to do some research and check, be ready to set those slot times around the 13th, but we will see many more slots added by the time that we get to the 13th. I think we're only halfway there with employers adding their time slots. So many more to come.
That's great. Thank you so much, Renee and Andrea. That's really helpful. So I think the best advice that we have is certainly for students to make sure that you and candidates to check back by March 13th to be able to see if we have additional slots have been listed. Thank you. Were there any other questions from anyone who's tuning in today before we close out? We still have a good 10 minutes so we can answer any questions that you might have. Well, if there are no other questions, I will say you may encounter more questions as you start going through the registration process. So we do encourage you to check out our website, which has been listed in the chat, percjobfair.org. It has a lot of great information. It has some of the how-to videos like the one that we showed earlier to really help guide you through the registration process. If you also, you can always reach out to your Office of Career Development or send an email to percjobfair@gmail.com as well. We also encourage you to follow us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram. We are at PERC Job Fair. We'll be sharing some of the tips that we went over today, as well as more registration information. So those are all good resources for you as you navigate the registration process and the fair itself. But we'd like to thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to being able to see all of you virtually later in March. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.